Hey, we're getting closer to Titletown, Green Bay, Wisconsin, hosting the NFL Draft. We're going to have some Ole Miss players go that night. That'll be Thursday night, by the way, as Mike Detillier knows. And then we'll go Saturday, second and third round, and then they'll finish it up. No, Friday, second and third round, and then Saturday they'll finish it up. So Thursday night, first round was brilliant. Primetime TV, everybody gets hot and bothered. We went to the draft a couple of years ago out in Las Vegas. It's even crazier than I thought. Absolutely wild. So we welcome in NFL Draft Insider Mike Detillier on the Out of Bounds Show, brought to you by your next video wall from Sound and Communications. Video walls for your lobbies in hospitals, law firms, technology companies. Video walls to showcase your school, K through 12, your university, your arenas, and so on. Video walls and sports books, all powered by SoundcomAV.com. Mississippi-owned company for over 60 years. Sound and Communications. They'll power your next video wall for your business. Or hell, you may put one in your man room. It's all good. We welcome in Mike D to the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. By the way, Jake Mangum will join us in the third hour. He went 4 for 4 last night with the Tampa Bay Rays. Mangum just texted me back. Jake will join us in the 9 o'clock hour. You can stream the show on the Out of Bounds radio app. Mike D, you've been doing draft evaluations for decades. What's the biggest difference in how teams scout now versus 20, 30 years ago, Mike D?
Or this is year 40 for me, so we can go that far. It's a more, I think, drawn-out draft process. Years ago, very few coaches had any say in who would get selected. Today, that's a different story. Because now the draft being in late April, you have time that there are certain coaches that do have tremendous say, and it gets away from the scouting part of things, of looking at it where the GM has the final say. It's from a big man standpoint, there was always big people in the draft. But there's not as many back then as there is today. Guys that can move. That's the biggest difference I see today. That the athlete today, big man athlete, is you might have had a couple of 3 like that back in the 80s. Today, there are a lot more of them. And the big question mark is, how will they fit? And I think that's always been the big question mark when you select a player, how well they fit your scheme. So I think the whole process is a little different than, say, back in the 80s when I first started doing this, because it's a more elongated system of working this out until late April. And everybody's got a say. And some influences here of workouts, individual workouts, and combine, and all this sort of thing. So it's a little bit different, but it's still very much a hit and miss business. It's an educated guess.
True. And
Bill Walsh told me that years ago. He got into. We presented him with the Pete Rozelle Award here for the Touchdown Club in New Orleans Hall of Fame. And so I get an opportunity to talk to Bill, and he was one of the masters of it. He really was. For a coach, he had a great eye for talent and a great eye for fit. What would fit his particular scheme in San Francisco? And, he went through this long process of what we're looking for and a kind of coded system of, we look at certain elements of their play and all this. And he just bust out laughing. He said, at the end, it's an educated guess.
No doubt.
But that was Bill being Bill. My neighbor, Paul Brown, was a backup quarterback for Paul Brown, Joe Clark.
Okay.
And so Joe would always tell me that was sort of Paul's comment. Coach Brown always sort of felt the draft process was a little bit of an educated guess. So when Coach Walsh told me this, it reminded me of what Joe had told me. And when I told him about it, he said, yeah, Bill coached for Paul. He probably just repeating him. He said, because that's what I told you. I'm just repeating Paul. So, yeah, it really is. It's a guess. You don't know what today a big difference is, what fame and fortune does to a young athlete, even an older athlete, because automatically you go from maybe having zero all of a sudden becoming rich, and I mean overnight. And you do also have social media as a collegiate player, but man, rich and famous can affect your focus, and bed becomes real comfortable in the morning, where maybe you would want to go work out. Man, I'm going to stay in here for a while.
Right.
So there's so many different elements, and I think that's the one thing I hear more from scouts and GMs. They try to get the player to talk about his love of the game, because, I think the great players, no matter what they got paid, they were going to give it to you. With some guys, once they get that first big check or second big check, it's over. That drive, the talent's still there. The drive, that's the big question mark.
That's why a different sport, but I mean, that's what separated Michael Jordan. I mean, the dude was just, regardless of fame and fortune and rings, he was still driven to cut your heart out every night in the NBA. It's just remarkable.
And we saw it in the NFL. Look all the money Tom Brady made.
Oh,
Peyton
gosh.
Manning made.
Great point.
Drew Brees made. I mean, it didn't matter to them what they were making. It mattered to their accountant and that sort of thing. But I think for them, it was all about really the love of the game. And I think you try to find that in a player. I hate to say it, but I think it's true today. There is a lot of profiling that goes on in any sport they have. I don't care if it's NBA, Major League Baseball, NFL, you name it. There's a certain profile of a player that you want him to answer a question or act a certain way. And you can get fooled with that real quickly, because if you're a 50 or a 60-year-old man and you're talking to a 21-year-old young man, okay, they grew up differently. How they react to things are differently. And I'll never forget, Mike Detillier was with the Saints, and they were going to take a running back, okay, that year. And he interviewed. He got to sit down with Ricky Williams and Edgerrin James that year. And he told me the story. Ricky's interview was unbelievable. He said, he answered every question, looked you in the eye. You could see he was a tough guy. And certainly what he did at Texas, that was some big numbers there that you were looking at. And he carried that Longhorn team. And then he interviewed Edgerrin James. Okay, and he said, he just didn't come off well with me. He said, man, he shook my hand. It was sort of a half-hearted handshake. He really didn't look me in the eye. A lot of times he was looking down. And he said, I don't know about that guy if he can play. Well, the first time they played a preseason game, the rookie year for both, Edgerrin James went off in the first quarter of a preseason game. Well, Mike was so livid about that because he knew that, man, did he misevaluate that with James big time. And it dawned on me then that Mike wasn't going to be that second time around was going to be a lot different because the world had sort of changed on him overnight. And he didn't get it that athlete was maybe going to react differently. And Ricky became the bit of the flake, and James was the model guy.
No doubt.
For the Colts. So, man, you think sometimes you know it, and then you get fooled.
Wow.
You get fooled big time.
Man, that's a great story. Mike Ditka sold on Ricky Williams, did not like the Edger and James interview, and the rest is history. Peyton and James were hell for years with the Colts. I don't know how long they were together, Mike, but it was several. Mike D on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. In your opinion, who is the most, and I know this isn't a good QB class, but who's the most underrated quarterback prospect in the draft this year, Mike D?
I don't know if I could put underrated on a Cam Ward or Shadir Sanders or even Jaxson Dart, to be honest with you. I mean, everything sort of has been broken down with those guys to the point where, it's nothing shocking, when because you've seen them play so much. I think one guy who's got a shot is Kyle McCord from Syracuse, who started out at Ohio State. And I watched him this year. Now, he threw a ton of passes for Syracuse. Their running game ain't nothing to write home to mom about, so to speak. And so they used that little short pass almost like an extended handoff. He went to the East-West Shrine game, and I thought he really, really did himself good there. He's smart. He's accurate. He sees the field very well. His read process on defenses are exceptional. How well he'll handle pressure at the NFL level. When I'm talking about pressure, I'm talking about pass rush, I think is the big question with him. He's okay as an athlete. He's not a movement guy by any stretch. He's a pocket guy. But I really like what I see from Kyle McCord from Syracuse.
I agree.
Think, of all the guys, he may be the most underrated because I'm not sure, and I think it's more personality conflict or maybe just they didn't jive of what happened to him at Ohio State with Ryan Day. That was definitely something there behind the scenes between the two guys. And why would you leave Ohio State to go to Syracuse?
Right.
And knowing what you left, how good that team was. Because when all those defensive players decided they were going to stay another year, and then you already had Henderson, and then you get, Judkins from Ole Miss, man, that would have been a hard one for me to leave, but I get it. I think there was a personality conflict between him and Ryan, and he just decided to go to Syracuse. I thought he did himself really well this year. I was impressed watching him play. And then when I go back and watch the film on him, I was even more impressed with his processing of finding secondary and third receivers downfield. I think he did it very, very well this year. Extremely well.
He had a hell of a year, for sure. Let's switch gears to the LSU Tigers. And you and I have discussed that Brian Kelly isn't going anywhere, but with his fat contract, but that, LSU Tiger fans are ready to win big. Do you believe that LSU has put themselves in position? It'll be Nussmeier's second year. I'm expecting a pretty big jump from him. I thought he played well, and it was only his first year, which people forget. You know that. Do you feel like LSU has put together a roster that is capable of being in the hunt for a college football playoff berth in November, Mike D?
I think they put together a roster that can be a hunt team. Would I put them at the top of the rung of the ladder? No. But I think they've pieced together, and they have the most important piece, and that's at the quarterback position. with Garrett Nussmeier. So I like that. They do have a very good running back in Caden Durham. We got to see him last year as a true freshman. He was very impressive to me. Their receiving core, I think, is better this year than it was a year ago. They do lose Mason Taylor, but Bauer Sharp, who he started out in southeastern Louisiana. He was a quarterback. I watched him play as a freshman, and I told some of the assistant coaches at Southeastern, "You're not gonna have him long. He ain't staying here." He goes to Oklahoma. He leads the Sooners in receptions, and now he's on the Tiger team as a tight end, along with Tre'Davious Green, the 6'7" tight end. The question mark on offense is how quickly they can get this offensive line to gel. They lose 4 starters along the offensive line. That's a lot. Now, they have brought in a couple guys that have started elsewhere, in Braylon Moore, Josh Thompson. Josh has started at right guard at Northwestern. Braylon Moore started at center for Virginia Tech. So you've got some pieces there. Defensive line, this is probably, from a talent standpoint, the best Kelly's had at LSU. So I think that's a plus. Linebacker, I think they'll be fine there. The Weeks brothers, along with Harold Perkins, you got something there. The cornerback safety group is the one to watch, because that's where, throughout the years, LSU, especially under Coach Miles, it started really under Coach Saban, and you went through that time frame of DBU at LSU with Coach Saban, Coach Miles, and the early years of Coach Orgeron. And then all of a sudden, the talent level in the state changed, in that a lot of those guys that were playing defensive back now started playing receiver. That's what 7-on-7 does. And so they have not been a good secondary team for the last 3 or 4 years. Haven't. I think that's the key for them, because the way the world has changed, and that you throw the football so much, that you've got to have really good play at cornerback and safety. That, for me, is the biggest question mark for LSU if they're going to make a national championship run, is how well they play in the secondary. Because I think they'll be better in the front seven. I can't tell you about at cornerback and safety. They've recruited pretty well there the last couple of years. It's now the development. Corey Raymond's got to be able to develop those young guys that they've brought in. I think that's the key, Bo, to be honest with you. That one area, I think, is the key for them to make I think they'll be there in that 12-man hunt, but to make a real run at a national championship, your secondary better be damn good.
Mm. For our listeners, LSU goes to Ole Miss September 27th. So
man, what happened to this Halloween stuff?
I know,
man. Because you on the calendar when they played Ole Miss, since I was a kid, you sort of knew it. Now that part has changed just because of the way the scheduling is. I was talking to Archie about this, and he was like, "Did they forget about late October?" I was like, "I don't think they forgot about it. It's just the way it is." And yeah, that's a big test. But I think really the big test is game 1, Clemson.
Yeah, at Clemson.
Because of who you got to play at quarterback. It's a big test for your pass rush and your secondary. That cat playing quarterback for Clemson is pretty damn good, I can tell you that.
He is.
Man, can he whip that ball? It comes out sort of funky at times. It really does. But it gets there, and it gets there fast. And LSU under Brian Kelly has struggled tremendously in game 1. Really has struggled with him. And somewhere along the line, you got to get that anvil off your back. You got to put a W up to start the season.
Man, That's a tough one. I kind of like
and in Clemson. It ain't no, this little road trip, so to speak, where it's a neutral field. You in Clemson.
Yeah, I don't like that scheduling. I like the look. It's great for you and I and college football fans that we get that kind of game and those games. But like Ole Miss starts with Georgia State to just kind of figure out what the hell's going on, and LSU has just jumped in it in Las Vegas last year. I guess Southern Cal, I guess it was, or somebody, and the year before.
Yeah, and they played back-to-back games against Florida State.
That's right. Not ideal. Not ideal. I'd like to go with the warm-up. I see Southeastern Louisiana here September 20th. I'd rather have that game August 30th and kind of get your feet wet. But here we go. But look, LSU at Ole Miss September 27th, Vaught Hemingway. You remember last year's game. Somehow LSU pulled that thing off, which was insanity. And now they'll go at it again in Oxford. Mike D, have a great week, my man. We'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks so much, Bo. Appreciate it. Just think the last two LSU Ole Miss games. 2 years ago, that was a shootout that if you had the over, you covered midway into the third quarter. and then last year, LSU didn't have the lead into the final play.
Yeah. I mean, goodness.
That's great. That's a crazy back-to-back games against Ole Miss.
I mean,
it really was.
Back shoulder throw right there at the pylon in overtime. I think that's right. On the right side. Unbelievable.
Kyron Lacey comes up with the catch. And basically, that from what Garrett told me, they kind of drew that up in the dirt.
Oh, wow. Wow.
That basically, Lacey said, throw it to me. I can beat the guy. Lacey basically, but Lacey tells that, he would tell that to anybody. But I think on this play, I think he knew he had sort of set him up, and he was going to get some separation. He was wide open, to be honest with you. And, man, Nussmeier makes a dart throw on that.
Yeah, he did. Mike Detillier on the Out of Bounds show. We'll talk to you next week, Mike D.
Thank you, Bo.
WWL Radio TV New Orleans. He joined us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Do you need a new video wall for your K through 12 school, community college, maybe your business school, engineering school, your bar, restaurant, law firm? SoundcomAV.com. Sound and Communications. Call them for your next video wall for your business or home.